Welcome to Hard Beautiful Journey, where we embrace vulnerability as our superpower and let courage light our path. I'm Tiff Carson, here to share heartfelt stories of healing, grief, and resilience. Each week, I'll talk with guests from experts to everyday heroes about their journeys through adversity. Together, we'll uncover the beauty that emerges from life's challenges and how each experience can spark profound growth. Join us on this courageous journey of connection and transformation. There's a moment in every life where the ground gives out. You didn't plan for it, you didn't see it coming, but in an instant, everything shifts. And in that pause, right after the news, the diagnosis, the fire, the loss, you get to choose who you become next. That's what today's conversation is about. I'm sitting down with someone I've never met before, Dan Reilly, and maybe that's exactly what makes this so powerful, because I get to be curious alongside you. Dan's story includes some wild chapters: a bank robbery, escaping California wildfires, and a cancer diagnosis that changed his life. But what struck me most was what he chose to do with all of it. He didn't just survive, he transformed. So I want to ask you something as we begin. What's the thing life handed you that you never asked for, but might just be the invitation to finally come home to yourself? This is about second chances, about telling the truth, about finding meaning in the mess. So let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast, Dan. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you so much for that introduction. That was wonderful. Thank you. Really appreciate being here.
I am really looking forward to our conversation. And you have described yourself as a pretty ordinary guy, a banker, a husband, a dad, but your story is anything but ordinary. Can you take us back to who you were before that first major life shakeup and how you see that version of yourself now?
Wow, great question. I'm 55 years old. I live in Santa Rosa, California. We're a blended family. My wife and I, we've been together we've been married for 2.5 years, but been together 14 years. And prior to that, I would say that I was years old. I was out of shape. I was overweight. I was definitely not taking care of myself. I was, I was living like a lot of people that I knew, under a lot of stress, under a lot of pressure. And one of the things that I definitely did not do very well is take care of my health. There were signs along the way when I was younger that there were things that I should have paid more attention to. Signs like heartburn and acid reflux were just, I come from a very large Italian family, and that was just part of everything
Life.
that we did within our life within our culture and eating and everything. And so looking back now where I am compared to where I was, I don't see myself even as the same person, not just physically, but emotionally. I'd say I'm more boldly confident in being able to have conversations openly
Mm.
about some of the things that I've gone through in my life. But today it's really about not just taking care of myself, but taking care of the people around me. I see myself as a better husband, as a better friend, as a better father. And I have a purpose in my life that's driving me forward every day.
Mm-hmm. So looking back, what was that first real crack in the foundation, that big one that made you realize that life wasn't as safe or stable as you thought it was?
Yeah. Wow. That goes back to September of 2017, what I call one of my first wake up calls. And there was a series of 3 that came in rapid succession. And the first one in September 2017, I went to work that Saturday morning, in retail banking like I had for so many years. I've been in retail banking now for about 22 years. And there was just before closing time, someone came into the bank, and I greeted that person at the door. And it turned out that it was actually an armed bank robbery. They they pulled out a gun out of a paper, took it out of a paper bag and pointed it directly at my chest, arm's length away. And so during that moment, your mind freezes. You don't really think that this could possibly be reality. And
Mhm.
in that moment, things moved almost as in slow motion, but very rapidly. And I went home later on that evening. The house was cleared. My wife went to go visit family that night. The kids were out of the house, and I didn't go to bed till 4:30 that morning, just reliving those moments in my head and that conversation that I had with that person
Mm.
in my head, and thinking how things could have gone differently had I made different decisions or if he made different choices. And in that moment, I realized, number one, he didn't shoot me. I'm still alive, so I'm here for a reason. What is that reason? I asked God that night, what is that reason?
Mhm.
I, I didn't come up with any answers. I think I had to go through this journey first to really find that answer. But that was the first time that I realized if he didn't shoot me, if I'm not dead, then why am I killing myself? I think I need to make different choices. Now, that didn't happen immediately. That
Mhm.
happened 8 months later. So it took some time. But that was really the first moment that I realized I got to do something different in life.
That's powerful that what you said to yourself. So if he didn't kill you, why are you killing yourself? That
Right.
is that is a big aha, right? So what was the next of the 3 that happened for you?
Yeah. So after the bank robbery, and I had spent hours afterwards with law enforcement and FBI. And so while that was underway, the investigation was underway, the intruder was apprehended at that time. So there was still a lot of anxiety and whether or not it was still safe to go out.
Mhm.
3 weeks later, my wife and I were awakened in the middle of the night about 1:30 in the morning with neighbors driving up and down the street honking their horns. Couldn't really figure out why, but it was Labor Day weekend. And excuse me, not Labor Day weekend. I think it was a Columbus Day weekend. And we were being warned and alarmed that there was a fire over the ridge. Now, my wife was very alarmed that the fire was nearer than we anticipated. High winds that night. I'm not really it's very difficult for me to wake up in the middle of the night. So she ran outside to find out what was going on with all the car horns blaring, find out that there were other neighbors outside, and they had all decided that it was time to evacuate the neighborhood. And that's what the neighbors were trying to get our attention. So she runs upstairs, she shakes me awake, gets the kids awake. Before you know it, we're grabbing whatever we possibly can and shoving them in the car. We're making sure that our kids are safe. And we find ourselves in a very long line in traffic at 1:45 in the morning, trying to get out of our community. And so it turned out that the fires they were enclosing around us, and high winds that evening. Fire travels very rapidly.
Mm.
It started just north of us, but within just a few hours, it was within our town, our city, and in our community. So we fled. Yeah, we fled to my in-laws' house, which they live several miles away. But within a few hours, that area was no longer safe either. And you could hear the explosions of propane tanks at gas stations exploding. And then later on that afternoon, just ash just fell from the sky as like snowflakes
Mhm.
and just covered the ground. very terrifying.
So how is, like, seeing them happen, like the one that happened in Pasadena and in January, like, how does that affect you now when you see it happening again and again?
Well, it happened to us 4 years out of 5. And so it wasn't just that first fire in 2017, it was the fires thereafter as well. And one of the things that I'm reminded about is during that time, while the air was full of smoke and soot, it was very difficult to breathe. During that time, I ended up in the emergency room because I was having a hard time to breathe. And so turned out that's eventually when I was diagnosed with COPD. Didn't even know that I had it until during the fires, it inflamed my respiratory system. So the area now, years later, 8 years later, there are still areas that are still scorched, but I no longer see those as damaged lots or houses or things that we lost because we can rebuild those things. What
Mhm.
I see now is new growth in those areas. And it's a reminder for me that transformation occurs everywhere in nature, not just in ourselves. Um, and tragedy can be very beautiful,
Mm.
but not in the moment that you're experiencing it, of course.
Yeah. So what was the 3rd event?
Yeah. The third event was a cancer diagnosis. I ended up in the emergency room in June of 22 during having dinner late at night, and I got some food stuck in my chest area that really hurt. And I'd been going to the gym 4 days a week for the last 3 or 4 years. And so I just felt they were just muscle aches and pains that I was experiencing. But the restriction in my chest and numbness in my left arm alarmed me enough to ask my wife to take me to the emergency room. And so I spent the night there with no diagnosis, no prognosis of what that occurrence really was. About 5 months later, I ended up in my doctor's office and I was being treated for acid reflux and GERD. And I was just prescribed PPIs, which are proton pump inhibitors, which are basically over the counter.
Mhm.
And so I was on that for 30 days at a time with no relief. Doctor suggested that I increase my diagnosis to twice a day instead of once a day. So after about 90 days of going through this, at the February of 23, um, end of February of 23, I was diagnosed with GERD, which is gastroesophageal reflux disease. It's the natural progression of heartburn acid reflux, GERD, before precancerous and cancerous conditions could possibly be in effect.
Mhm.
And so by the end of February, early in March, I was on a liquid diet only. I had a lot of trouble during that time swallowing and keeping food down. So solid foods became very difficult to eat and keep down. So luckily, because I had gone through a physical transformation of losing about 75 pounds over a couple years, and I worked with a physical trainer, a fitness trainer, and a health coach that helped me build routines in place, including meal prepping and exercise. I had some tools in my toolkit that I could utilize and rely on. And one of them was meal prepping with homemade protein shakes. And that got me through a couple months. By April, I went to my doctor again and I said, because we've been communicating online, and I told him something's really wrong. I really need to come in and see you. I can no longer consume solid foods. So he scheduled a colonoscopy and endoscopy. He didn't even schedule the endoscopy right away. I actually had to advocate and fight for that. His comment to me was, if you don't take these PPIs, that proton pump inhibitors, we're going to be forced to put a scope down your throat. It's going to be invasive and you're not going to like that. And I looked straight at him at that doctor's appointment in April. And I said, that is exactly what I am asking you to do.
Mhm.
Something's wrong, and it's not okay to continue just to take these over the counter pills.
Yeah.
And, and so I said, you have to put me out for the colonoscopy anyway. just schedule it on the same day. And so
Mm.
he did.
Mm.
And that was May 4th. On May 4th, I was diagnosed with stage 3 esophageal cancer. They found a 4-inch tumor at the lower end of my esophagus, just above my esophageal junction, which goes right into the stomach. And the gastroenterologist said that day that it looks like it had been there for 1 to 2 years.
Oh my goodness. So, wow. There's a moment in your book where you laugh after your diagnosis while your father was weeping. But what was really going on inside of you at that moment, and what did that laughter mean for your healing?
Hmm. I came home from that endoscopy procedure still partially sedated, and I had not grasped the news that we were just delivered. Thank goodness my wife was there.
Mhm.
Uh, so she was able to then translate what the doctor had said afterwards. And so we came home, we sat a moment, we had a quiet moment with each other. But my dad has always been my biggest hero. So I always have reached out to him and we talk about everything. I still call him every weekend, even today.
Mhm.
And so this was one of those moments that I knew this was a phone call to dad. And so he was waiting on the procedure to be over. And so I gave him a call and we chatted for a little bit. And I said, dad, I said, the doctor said it looks like it had been there for a while. And I didn't realize the gravity of what I just said at that moment. It was, dad, the doctor said it's been there for a while. And my father then broke down thinking, oh no, it might be too late to do anything.
Mhm.
I have this nervous tendency that I laugh when I get nervous. And that's what I did. I wasn't laughing at my father's sadness. I was laughing at, holy Toledo. What kind of situation am I really in? And is it real? Can I get out of it? And then at that moment, I was already in the middle of writing this book. And I said, dad, what another great chapter in the book. And, I laughed thinking, wow, I have another 40,000 words I have to go and write, which will complete this book. And now it's going to be really good. But I didn't really take into account what my father was going through. And later on that evening, I had finally went to bed, but it was the next day that reality set in, and I realized that this was not funny.
Mhm.
And that was the first day I planned my funeral.
Oh my gosh. So first off, as a author myself, I appreciate that realization that you might have another chapter. I do appreciate that, but I also appreciate the after when you have time to really think about the seriousness of it and the gravity of it. So what ended up happening with your diagnosis and your treatment?
Yeah, so May 4th, I was diagnosed. I was then rushed into meeting with an oncologist and PET scans. My first chemo treatment was on June 5th. So almost a month later, we started with treatment. My treatment plan was 4 cycles of FLOT, which is a combination of 4 different types of chemo, and then a short pause to have surgery, and then another 4 cycles of FLOT. And a cycle is, for me, it was 48 hours of being on chemo every 2 weeks. So I would go in on a Thursday morning and I had a port installed. So they would attach the chemo pump right to my port. And I would be there until about 5 in the evening. And then before I left the hospital, I they had this small little pump. It was in the form of a ball, and I wore in a little fanny pack, and that dripped overnight from the time I left the hospital on Thursday evening. Then I would go back again Friday evening to have it all removed. So I wore that even while I was sleeping.
Mm, mhm.
And so that was every 2 weeks. So by Friday afternoon or evening, I'd go back in, I'd have it removed. And then Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, I was in bed. Blackout curtains on the windows. I didn't eat. I barely hydrated. Everybody in the house kind of knew that that was just dad's time to just recoup. And about on the third day, I would start to get a little hungry later on that evening. And so we eventually did 5 cycles of flop before surgery. Surgery was then in August. I think it was August 25th of 23,
Mhm.
after a pause of about 3 weeks of chemo. And then I had an esophagectomy. Esophagectomy, they removed a third of my stomach. They removed 2/3 of my esophagus. So now my stomach and the bottom of my throat meet in my chest.
Mm. Mhm.
And after about 5 weeks of recouping from surgery, I was in the hospital for 7 days. Surgery took about a little bit more than 6 hours.
Mhm.
We started another 3 cycles of flop between September and November 2nd. So November 2nd was my last chemo cycle.
Mhm. And are you cancer-free now or in remission?
So as of now, I'm cancer free. Um, I actually go in for a CT scan and blood work tomorrow, actually.
Wow.
So right now, every 6 months, at the last time I went in 6 months ago, scans and everything looked cleared. They did remove lymph nodes during surgery, but I was fortunate because in my situation, I didn't have to have a feeding tube either before surgery or after surgery.
Mhm.
And that's kind of a big deal. They stick a tube into your small intestine in case you can't eat or get in enough nutrients.
Mm.
And I didn't have that situation because one of the things that prepared me for this journey, for this treatment and this diagnosis was the years that I spent prior to that, those 4 years when I was at a crossroads and I said, I could either give up or I could either wake up. And I chose to make a difference in my life and spend 4 years really working on me
Mhm.
emotionally and physically. But that physical transformation of losing 75 pounds, going to the gym for about 45 minutes, 4 days a week, meal prepping on weekends so that I know exactly what I was going to eat throughout the week and how many calories I was going to take in and weighing myself every day and meditating and praying and spending time outdoors and being with family and those that you love. That's what I did during that time. I just didn't know I was preparing for a cancer diagnosis. But my thoracic surgeons told me that's most likely what saved my life.
Oh my goodness. That is so beautiful that you were given that gift of knowing what your body, your spirit, everything needed before you really knew what you needed, right? So, the subtitle of your book is A Midlife Memoir of Resilience, Rediscovery, and Getting It Right. What does getting it right mean to you now?
What a great question. Very emotional for me too.
Take your time. I'm here.
Getting it right is about progress, not perfection. It's about doing the things that you love the most and being with the people that you love the most. It's about not having regrets at the end of your life or even during your life. I've realized that there were so many things that I regretted doing wrong and incorrectly in the past. And so, what I realized through this journey was none of that matters. When I thought that I was not going to make it to my golden years, when I thought about my children and the nightmares and the panic attacks that I went through, there were so many things that were a burden through this diagnosis and through this this journey, I realized that the most important things to me in my life were the people around me. The things that mattered the most were things that were simple, not the things that we go out to hustle in the world for. And so getting it right meant being a better husband, being a better father, being a better friend, finding something that drives me every single day, wanting to help other people, wanting to be a good person. I look at the intruder in the bank that day, and it was a terrifying experience. If he would have sneezed and accidentally pulled the trigger, he would not have missed. He couldn't.
Mhm.
And so when I look at things like that, when I look at the nightmares that I was having because of that, or the anxiety of a cancer diagnosis and not knowing whether or not you're going to be able to come out of treatment because of it, what I realized was I have an opportunity to be better than I was. And for me, that didn't really take a lot. All I had to do was really focus on me and love the people around me. And so getting it right at this point now is waking up every day with the purpose of just trying to be better than I was yesterday. What drives me today now is when my gastroenterologist told me that it most likely that tumor had been there for 1 to 2 years. I was told by another doctor if I would have waited another 4 to 6 months, I could have possibly have been diagnosed at stage 4. At stage 4, you don't get treatment for this
Mhm.
cancer.
Mhm.
I was very fortunate to have this surgery. I had met others in the infusion center that couldn't have surgery, and I had those conversations with those people, and they were just so happy for me. I tell a story of an elderly lady that I met in the infusion center in the book, and she was just so happy for me that I could have surgery because she couldn't. And I realized there's an opportunity for me that other people don't. And so if I have a second chance to live a better life, to do something different, to make an impact on someone else's life, then just do it the best I can. And that's really the message to my children in this book. What really started out as a letter to my children evolved into this book. And it was really that life is tough, but whatever you do it to the best of your ability.
Mhm. So, let's talk about those very important people in your life. What role did your wife, Jasmine, your family, and your community play in your recovery and your rediscovery?
Wow. My wife is my strength, without a doubt. My family is the foundation. My children, most importantly in my life, they're the ones that I was constantly thinking about during this entire journey, that if I was no longer here, what would I miss and what would I leave behind? Because I had gone through loss in my life, and knowing what they would have gone through, I was trying to find ways of easing that. And so my family, without a doubt, is the core of everything that I do. My my father and I are very, very close. My biological mother died when I was very young, so that's one of the things that bonded us together. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. He loves all 6 of his kids, and I'm very close with my brothers and sisters. But we live in 6 different states, and so as I was going through this, we constantly kept in touch. My wife and I, this is our second marriage. When I first got divorced, my father flew out to California and lived with me for 3 months. I had my elderly grandfather with me. I had both kids with me, and he came out and he was there and incredibly supportive. When I was diagnosed and just before going into surgery, My father came out for 3 weeks. He wanted to be there for surgery with me the week prior to surgery and after surgery. He was in the hospital every single day.
So much love.
And so I had surgery up in Sacramento. It's a couple hours away, but I had family that came to Sacramento, and we stayed in Sacramento and rented a house up there for a week so that family could all stay together. I have a very large family on the East Coast. My aunt Mary called my aunt Mary, she's 95 years old. She called me every day. I have an incredible network of friends in the area. And during treatment, we had a food train. Like every couple days, we'd have food dropped off. My wife's family is here in California. And so they organized and made sure that if there was something that I needed, if my wife couldn't stay home that day, that there were other people there that were so supportive.
Mm.
And that incredible generosity that others have shown. I write in the book how cancer creates community. It really, really does. There's a bond and a network
Mhm.
of people with so much love and kindness and hope
Mhm.
that was so difficult not to accept. And so now that I'm through what I'm through and I have unpacked that backpack of heavy burdens in my life, and I looked at each one of those burdens and they were rocks. And then when I sat that backpack down and examined each one of those rocks and realized that none of it was important, I realized I can let it go. I now have the capacity to help somebody else. And that's what drives me every day. That's what I want to do. That's my purpose because I have that capacity. I have that energy to try to light the way for somebody else who maybe is just going through their treatment, maybe who is just diagnosed, maybe somebody who's at risk and doesn't know it, or just somebody who needs a little extra hand throughout the day. The lady that lives across the street lost her son and her husband within just a few months. She's widowed and lives across the street. Making dinner for her on the holiday or on a weekend or taking her trash out every week,
Mhm.
those are small little things that have opened up my world. And now the family's involved.
Yeah.
Now the family helps with little things like that.
Yeah.
So there's a positive impact from all this, and my family's starting to see it and starting to mimic some of that kindness and goodness that I received during a very dark time.
So you've shown it today. You are a man who is willing to talk about vulnerability and fear and show emotion, talk about emotion, things that many men have been taught to avoid. What helped you finally break that silence and use your voice?
Mm. Yeah, I would say two things. One, I had a clear message that it is important that others hear. And that is, you got to take care of yourself. Your health should be number one because you can't take care of your family if you're not in a healthy position to do so. You can't take care of yourself. You're not going to be able to get through your day if you're not healthy, whether that's physical, mental, or spiritual. For me, it was all of them. I had to find components in each one. And so that message of being somewhat bold about esophageal cancer and the risks of that, gave me that confidence to step forward and speak to those who want to listen. I would say that the second thing is I don't care what other people think. And what I mean by that, I don't mean to sound cruel, but there are things within maybe my message of, taking better care of yourself, don't drink, don't smoke, go see your doctor regularly, doesn't always resonate with people. I was talking to a colleague of mine who's a 13-year cancer survivor, and he's out advocating for the same message that I am, which is early detection and early screening helps with diagnosis, helps preventing this kind of cancer. And one of the things that he found in his study is that when a primary care physician tells their patient to go get screened, most of the time they don't even bother to do that because out of fear of
Finding
whatever,
something.
maybe,
Mhm.
yeah, finding something, going under sedation, not wanting to face reality.
Mm.
And maybe reality is you just have some really bad GERD and you need to monitor that. You need to take care of that. But I feel that I have a strong message to others uh, like myself who avoided certain risks and didn't take care of themselves. But at the same time, it's I'm I have that confidence to step forward and say there are so many things that are important in life. This going to the doctor shouldn't be one of them.
Mhm.
Shouldn't be so terrifying and scary.
So, this is something that I believe in so deeply, in that memoirs can be medicine. How has the process of writing your book helped you heal and make sense of your journey?
Mm. In the book, I talk about writing to heal. The section in there, a chapter in there, and the first challenge that I actually had was writing this stuff in my own journal to myself first. There were things that I talk about in the book that at the time that I was writing it, I had never spoken about before. One of the things I mentioned a little bit ago was that my biological mother had passed away when I was very young. She died at 22 years old. I was 6 months. My dad was 25. That was a story that was really between my father and I. It's one of the things that we shared between us. But through writing, what I learned was the things that I don't want to say I suffered from. Suffering is maybe too strong of a word, but there were things that I missed throughout my life that I didn't realize stemmed from early childhood.
Mhm.
The connection with my first wife and the financial issues that we had when we owned our own business. These were all things that writing down made them real that I didn't want to accept. Writing them down and then having to read them back or even have somebody else read them was very almost like intruding, like invasive that I was sharing things that I shouldn't have because there was a sense of comfort holding on to that when it was just mine and I wasn't putting it out and sharing it into the world. But I realized that in order to connect with people, in order to really share my story, I needed to be honest with myself. And there's a chapter in the book about self-honesty. And that chapter is really about facing these things that were so daunting and terrifying in the past. And so writing them down made them real, but writing them down also allowed me to let them go. And so I can talk about them now because they're out in the world. They're no longer a hidden secret. I went through things like losing a business, filing bankruptcy, losing my job the morning of my grandfather's funeral when I got the call. And so all these things, writing them down, I was embarrassed because of them, but I no longer care. about them any longer. So writing them down, I was able to let them go. I now share them with my children and others as life lessons of here's what it not just here's what happened to me, here's what happened, but here's what I learned from it. I hope it inspires you and allows you to have some sort of takeaway from from the decisions that I made in life.
Hmm. So your book, Seize Your Second Chance, releases today, Tuesday, May 20th. If someone is holding it in their hands for the first time, what do you hope that it awakens for them?
Wow. I hope that it inspires them. I would say if I had to say anything about what this book really means to me, I would say it's about overcoming remarkable odds in the face of adversity while embracing vulnerabilities. For me, that helped me get through a diagnosis. So I hope that it inspires them to embrace their own vulnerabilities and get them through whatever overcoming remarkable odds that they're looking and challenges that they're looking to get through in life. But at the end of the day, it's a story about family. It's a story about love. It's a story about connection and the things that we go through in life. And for me, it was about what mattered most. And what mattered most was my children and my family. And I wanted to leave that story behind for them in case something did happen to me. But again, at the end of the day, it's just a story about people being people and that human connection that we have.
Hmm. So, for the listener that is out there who feels like life has knocked them down one too many times, what would you say to help them believe in a second chance?
First thing I would say is don't give up. Don't give up. Second chances are beautiful. It's okay for me, I failed multiple times before I found my sea legs, before I found where I really belong in life and where I fit best in every day. So if you're struggling right now, if you are feeling like you're on a runaway horse, if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling defeated, if you're struggling, we've all been there. I have very dear friends of mine that we talk all the time, and it's part of life. But you know what? If you don't give up, if you keep pushing forward, remember small steps will get you forward. The way to get through 1,000-mile journey is by taking that first step. And if you just do that each day, try to be a little bit better than you were yesterday, not who someone else was. You can do it. Just keep moving forward, keep pushing forward, be persistent, and
Hmm.
don't give up.
Don't give up. So, I am going to move to the screen right now that is showing everyone that is on the video, watching the video. Here is Dan's book cover, and it is called Seize Your Second Chance. And you can find Dan at his website, which is danielpreilly.com, and he's also on Facebook at dan.reilly.773. So I know you have talked about this backpack, but can you give us a little bit more insight into what that backpack means for you?
Sure. So that backpack is more than just a design on the book cover. It's a symbol. And that symbol represented those heavy burdens that I carried around for so many years, those burdens that were in the form of rocks. And became a very heavy sack to carry around until I could no longer bear the heaviness, the burden. And so I put that down. I went to therapy and I pulled out each rock and examined each one. Now it's a set of what I carry around is a set of survival skills. Some of the things that I learned along this journey that I wanted to leave behind for my children. And so on the backpack, there's this little first aid logo. Part of that is a tribute to my grandparents because they volunteered for the first aid squad for 50 years in their hometown. It's kind of like the first responders out here in California. But that logo, that first aid symbol image now shows that it is not a backpack of burns, but it's a survival kit.
Move
It's where I
back
put my,
to, I'm going to move back. Here we go. So that they can see there's the symbols. Okay. Keep going. Sorry.
yep. So now it's a survival kit. It's the things that I now store, like ways of taking care of myself through meditation and eating right and things like that. That's what I carry around in that backpack now. The writing journal there is what allowed me to write to heal, to release all those burdens, the heaviness that I carried around, put it down on paper and then set it aside. So that backpack now is my life support. It's no longer a burden, it's a ballast.
Hmm. I absolutely love that. So this podcast, Dan, is rooted in healing and gratitude. Can you tell us one thing that you are deeply grateful for in this exact season of your life?
I am very grateful for every moment that I have when overcoming challenges and embracing opportunities and making the most of life. I feel like that's the reason why I'm here right now. And I hope by sharing my story with people maybe who have other similar experiences or other experiences that resonate with them, who are looking for a little bit of hope. I absolutely believe now, and so grateful for all of it. I wouldn't have changed any of it, not the intruder, not the fires, not the diagnosis, because all of those components together is who I am right now. And I'm a much better person today than I was prior to my diagnosis or any of those occurrences. So, what I'm so grateful for is this moment right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, Dan's story reminds us that we can't always choose what happens to us, but we can choose how we respond, and we can choose to begin again. We can choose to ask for help, to take care of our bodies, to tell the truth about our pain, and to believe that even in the hardest moments, that life must just be offering us a second chance or a third chance. So if this conversation stirred something in you, please don't ignore it. Let it move you and let it soften something in you and let it be the beginning of something new. If you want to take the next step toward healing, you can join me for my first Healing Heart Workshop, which is on Tuesday, May the 20th as well at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard, or download my free guided meditation to start coming home to yourself again. All of that can be found on my website, tiffcarson.com. Please don't forget to go and check out Dan's new book. And until next time, just remember that your heart is wiser than your fear, so you need to trust it. Thank you, Dan, so much for being here today and sharing your journey with us. And I am very grateful for your vulnerability and your heart. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to be a part of your podcast. And it's so lovely to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here for this episode of Hard, Beautiful Journey. I hope today's episode inspired you to embrace your own vulnerabilities and recognize the strength within you. Remember, every story of resilience adds to the beauty of our shared journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and leave a review. Your support helps me spread hope and healing to even more listeners. Until next time, Keep shining your light and embracing the beauty in your journey. Bye-bye.